What do you do when you can't keep running away from something because the call is coming from inside the house?
Someone. Anyone.
When all of that shame, all of that guilt, everything that you have been suppressing your whole life, compressing down, finally comes out. BoJack Horseman, Season 6, Episode 15, titled The View from Halfway Down, we see how the psyche must be heard. And if you don't do it the easy way, you're going to get it the hard way. Originally, I wanted to break this video down to show you how you'll be confronted by your old friendships, by your family, by career, all of your choices. Like, I wanted to break it down into succession. But as you watch this episode, it's quite chaotic and very deep and very symbolic. So I thought it was only fair that I show you along the way. Because if BoJack has to deal with it in real time, confronting all of these things together, and in our real lives, it's not like we get a nice care package of how things are going to hurt us or we're going to be dealing with like the realities of what's going on. So out of fairness, I think I am going to keep the chaos. The episode begins with BoJack standing in front of his childhood home. And I think that's quite poetic anyways, you know, if you are gonna rip off that band-aid and learn about yourself, start from the source. You're gonna go home first. Standing next to him is a young Sarah Lynn, right before her career had taken off, right before anything had happened. And as he opens the door, he sees a young version of his mother.
Plant. Dirt for inside. Goody.
Her first reaction is, great, dirt for the inside. And I find that really telling. You're about to get an episode about feeling dirty, feeling shame, feeling awful on the inside. There's a rich tapestry of symbolism in this episode, which is meant to heighten BoJack's confusion, but also be very stark in our faces. Where we see Corduroy throwing a rope and tying it into a noose.
Ooh, wait, stop it.
Oh, sorry. I forgot where I was for a second.
BoJack sits down for dinner with a particular cast of characters. He sits down with Sarah Lynn, Herb, Corduroy, his mother, his uncle Crackerjack, and eventually Secretariat, who comes in as Secretariat but also his father. Every single person at this table is dead. They're playing a game called Best Parts of Life and Worst Parts of Life. And it took me the second time around watching this episode to realize what was going on. So originally, I watched the episode with the lens of BoJack is being confronted by these people, and these are these people. First time you watch it, it's like an intervention. Like, you literally feel these people are themselves. And they're opening up in these conversations. They're finally getting their last say. They're finally really saying what they wanted to say to BoJack, to his face, to the world, to whatever it is. Until I realized I was completely wrong. What made me realize it was when I saw each character was not talking directly to BoJack. At this dinner, there were characters that were talking directly to each other. And I found that really weird because some of them were getting into like their arguments with each other. They were completely making two separate points. They were having two separate discussions.
I was authentically me.
What does being authentic have to do with anything?
And I just kept thinking, why are they not talking to BoJack? Why are they not talking to the main character? If this is his dinner of honor, why are they not talking to him? Until I realized they are talking to him. They are him. Every single person in this room right now is him.
It's just your brain going through what it feels like it has to go through.
BoJack being confronted by his past, BoJack's psyche being heard, BoJack's shame, everything that we are about to see is BoJack as Sarah Lynn, BoJack as Herb, BoJack as all of these people. And every point that is made, so everything I'm about to point out to you, two sides of BoJack. And everything he hates about himself, it's terrible, but we are inherently an accumulation of all of the people that we've met and have touched us and have integrated into our lives. We have imprinted on other people the same way they have imprinted on us. So why I started this video by saying the call is coming from inside the house. Because it literally is coming from inside the house. So everything that we are about to see is BoJack asking himself very big questions, really big questions he's been struggling with for the longest time, things that keep him awake at night. The reason he keeps having this particular recurring dream are because of these questions. This is why he keeps showing up to the dinner of the dead. Corduroy asked this question to Crackerjack.
Do you think your death meant something because it was in the service of a greater cause?
Do you think your death or your sacrifice was worth more? Or do you think your death was more important because you died in the line of service? You died for a cause. You had a reason that you died.
Sometimes I wonder...
But see, this is where I get hung up.
I feel if he had finished that thought, the thought would have been, I don't feel like I died for a reason. But put a pin in that, we are going to come back to that in a second. Because Corduroy points out about a senseless death, or a senseless trauma, or a senseless pain, or senseless suffering that has taken place, BoJack starts having a mini argument with his mother. And the argument is, if you valorize, if you really put suffering and sacrifice on a pedestal, what you do in your household, and it's very interesting he says household, but what you do is you create an atmosphere growing up, you create this thing inside of you, which basically means if you're happy, you're selfish. And the terminology is very strict here, based on who you're speaking to. So if it's the version of BoJack that is his mother, maybe that's a good way to do it, the version of BoJack that is his mother, the idea of sacrifice is sacrifice yourself for a cause, for a war, for a fight, lay down your life. That is the biggest sacrifice, and no other definition of sacrifice can exist that is not just your life and livelihood. But this gets picked up by the Sarah Lynn version of BoJack, which is, wait, hold on, I've sacrificed too.
I sacrificed a ton and I was freaking awesome. I gave my whole life.
You died in a hedonistic bender.
So when Sarah Lynn says, I sacrificed my livelihood and my life, and BoJack's mother responds, no, you died in a hedonistic bender, this is two sides. If this conversation is taking place between BoJack, one side of BoJack's brain understands how Sarah Lynn died. One side of BoJack's brain understands that Sarah Lynn, her whole life was a tragedy, and that's what she died. That's how she died, and it wasn't her death that was just tragic. It was her entire life that was tragic because of everything that happened.
It was hell.
But then you see the version of his mother. That version, that little devil on your shoulder, goes, no, she died in a hedonistic bender. No, she had control over her actions. No, at the end of the day, she was an addict. She was this, she was whatever. And that was the moment where I realized that, oh, this is BoJack playing devil's advocate with himself. He's not standing up for Sarah Lynn in this moment. He's not even agreeing with his mother. It's him fighting both sides of the battle. And I think this is why it needs to come out as it's going to come out, as it's going to be felt, because these are the questions we need answers to. If you don't get the answers to it, it will confront you it will hit you again in the face. It'll hit you again and again until you learn the lesson. And I will show you how that happens later. Back to the duality of BoJack. Now we realize that BoJack is conversing with himself and fighting with himself. I then started to pick up on the questions that BoJack is asking himself. BoJack doesn't like his uncle Crackerjack. He's been told his entire life that his uncle Crackerjack is the most noble person who has fought and sacrificed and given up his life.
Uncle I never met and yet could never live up to.
I think the question that BoJack is asking himself in this moment is his relationship with his mother so terrible because of someone like Crackerjack? Can I blame someone else for my relationship with my mother? Because if my house's philosophy is dying in a war or sacrificing your life is the most noble thing you can do, why is someone who has done the ultimate sacrifice theoretically the most noble thing they can do according to my house's philosophy? Why do I still hate that person? Why can I not put that person up on a pedestal? So he has to confront it. If that is a thought that he has to confront this argument. Why? So we get led back into the question of Sarah Lynn, Corduroy, and Crackerjack. BoJack has to ask himself, was Sarah Lynn's and Corduroy's deaths unnecessary? I think he also has to ask himself, is there meaning in that death? Is there meaning in their life?
And that is worth something.
No, that's a high you chase.
It was
you think
not.
What you see is he's having this battle in real time. So you see Corduroy sort of sitting there going, oh, it must have meant something. It should have meant something. And Sarah Lynn is sitting there fighting. I went through hell. It has to be for something. How can you say it can't be for something? It has to be for something. My life has to be for something. Are you saying my life wasn't something?
I will be remembered. That has to mean something. I will be...
I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer because I don't think we're meant to have a clear-cut answer for something like this. Some questions are too big. Even when Sarah Lynn is sitting there saying, I brought happiness to millions of people, BoJack isn't sitting there saying, yeah, you brought happiness to millions of people. That was good. That's a good life. You did a good thing. Because we're standing now in death. This girl has lost her life and her livelihood. She lost everything for nothing. For nothing, she's dead. She never got that life. She never got anything after it. She never got her childhood. She never got her adulthood. And she was exposed and exploited in life and in death. And that is the reality that he is confronting when this girl is there in front of him. And that's actually why the second she ends up on stage in the show, the first thing he says, imagine the whole dinner he doesn't say anything, he's not standing up for her, but the second he sees her in that moment on a stage, he says, I'm so sorry, I should have protected you. And she said, no, now the time is done. Now we can't speak.
I'm so sorry for everything that happened with you, with us. I should have protected you.
And what's gonna happen now during the dinner is we're seeing the cycle of BoJack take place, and every step of the way you see he's confronting himself. So we start with Crackerjack, where Crackerjack was the epitome of what you could be. You know, that you should, basically it set up the philosophy of you should, if you're ever happy, you're selfish. If you're ever happy, you are a bad person. Any form of happiness is a selfish act inherently, and being selfish is bad. It's that simple, right? So BoJack spent his whole life not being happy. Fine. So if I tick that box and I'm not happy, then I've technically done the right thing based on what I was taught growing up. But that wasn't right. Okay, so next we move on to Sarah Lynn. And Sarah Lynn is, okay, I went through hell, I had to make some tough decisions, I was exploited, I was in this fame industry, I had so many things going on, but at least I made millions of people happy. Surely that would have been enough. And then we learn that's not enough either. Corduroy confronts her and says, no, because again, you got joy out of it. You were just chasing a high. You were happy. If you were chasing a high and you were happy, you were selfish. So that's not a life worth living. Herb's life philosophy is you should live an authentic life, and I felt my best when I lived an authentic life to myself, and that was when I was the very best at everything, which actually upsets Sarah Lynn because she's saying how can you say I didn't live an authentic life? You say I never had the opportunity to live an authentic life, which is completely fair to her, but how do you live an authentic life? What is authenticity when everything you are is an accumulation of everything you've been taught? How do you find yourself? Bob then goes into another tangent where he says, I got the most pleasure out of my philanthropy and, you know, his charity work and all of these things. So Corduroy confronts him and says, well, if you got pleasure out of it, then it was a selfish act. It wasn't a selfless act.
Doesn't count then. If you got pleasure, it wasn't selfless. And it's only good if it's selfless.
So Herb asks a very real question, which is, even if I got some joy out of it, I still helped some people.
Helped people. Who cares if it made me feel good too?
So this is BoJack confronting himself saying, you know, Could I have lived a life where I just helped people? Would there have been a point to just helping people in life? And I think he believes there would have been no point to helping other people in life, because ultimately he's thinking that getting any joy out of anything means you're not helping anyone. It's a selfish act, so what's the point? What's the point? And that's why Herb asks him the question, Well, Herb is a representation of maybe I should have gone down that path. Yes, it would have been selfish, but at least it would have been selfish in the service of something. It is all really confusing when you start to piece it all together, and I swear, if I would have done a different version of a breakdown, which I did have prepared, I would have been much clearer. But I think this is just more interesting to think about, because it's so deep. I didn't realize how deep it was. When Herb is talking about his philanthropy, Corduroy also cuts him off and says the only way you can move forward is salvation through religion, which is also shut down quite quickly, because I don't think they wanted to delve into it for too long.
If I give myself to Christ, truly went down the path.
I don't care for this talk of religion.
But I think it needed to be touched on, because I think that's a dynamic that a lot of people think about and consider. And if you just take BoJack, and I think the only reason it's only spoken about for a few minutes before, a few seconds before being shut down by BoJack's mother, is because that's the duality in his life. I don't think BoJack has ever been able to, he says it, but I don't think BoJack has actually ever been able to surrender himself to an institute, because I don't think he believes in surrendering himself to an institute. He doesn't inherently like surrendering to anything. I think he says that he does, but he doesn't. And that's what led him to the question, does it matter to be remembered? Is your life only worth living if you were remembered for what you did? And it's really funny, because you don't control the narrative of what comes during your lifetime and after your lifetime. I think that's the chaos of everything, isn't it? It's the chaos of, he's the reason BoJack doesn't open up and confront all of these thoughts at once. And the reason all of these thoughts are coming into his head together is because that's kind of how getting overwhelmed feels like. It's not just dealing with the one thing. It's not, if he has to deal with Sarah Lynn's death, he has to deal with Corduroy's death. If he has to deal with Corduroy's death, he has to deal with Herb's death. He has to deal with his mother's death. He has to deal with things that he hasn't dealt with speaking to his mother. He has to open it up, and again, that's how it goes. Okay, if I have to think about all of these people dying, and then I think about my mother, oh wait, I'm thinking about my mother, I have to think about my relationship with my mother, but what about my relationship with my father? What about my relationship with my friends? Oh right, what about my relationship with my friends? Oh my god, I did this to my friend, but what about this girl who we met? What about this? What about that? And it's so funny, because the way it comes out in the end is when Corduroy was talking about his death, BoJack just went like, your death cracked my top 5. My top 5? I don't want to be so explicit, but if you remember the show, or if not, Google it afterwards, look at how BoJack found Corduroy.
Discovering you in your trailer definitely cracks my top 5.
That's why you avoid the psyche being heard. You avoid it, because once you open up the floodgates, that's the definition of, that's why people suppress their emotions. That's why you don't open it up, because once you open it up, it's like you have to deal with everything all at once. And it's impossible to deal with everything all at once, because you can't, because it's too much information, and you can't take it, break it down, think it through, grieve it, and get to the other side. Also penance, also remorse, consequence, everything that needs to come with it. It's a lot. It's a lot all at once. That's actually why he should have been grieving it the entire time. It's actually why he should have dealt with things in the proper way. And it's actually why things were building up and causing more problems over time, because he was never stopping acknowledging dealing with the consequences. You can't run away from the consequences. When Secretariat walks in, Secretariat obviously is BoJack's childhood hero, but Secretariat also came in as a representation of his father.
Dad, I already apologized. I was running.
Yes, as always.
The first thing you see is he starts arguing with his mother. And I think it's just BoJack in the middle of them, like, like a grown BoJack. And it's really comical to see him in the middle of these two people arguing, because it's just like, the second you see your parents arguing, you get thrown back to being a kid. You just become that same kid all over again in the middle of adults arguing. And it feels just as uncomfortable in adulthood as it does in childhood. Herb and Secretariat have a very eye-opening conversation.
It's like you didn't even want to kill yourself.
And I'm so glad I didn't.
And you get to see two people who reached the same crossroad and they both made different choices. One person made a choice of peace or finding something else, and the other person made the choice of this is it and I am done.
And running, well, that was the only thing that ever made sense to me, so if I couldn't do that, I was nobody.
Where you actually get what this episode is going to be called. It's the first indication. This episode is called The View from Halfway Down, and obviously Secretariat says you should have seen the view from up there, foreshadowing what's gonna come.
I got to go on my own terms. The view from up there.
He doesn't believe Herb. He even takes BoJack out for a smoke later and says, can you believe that guy? Can you believe that he thinks that you can find peace in life? You can never find peace in life if you don't find the thing you're good at. If you find the thing you're good at and you lose it, there's no meaning left in life. But he also goes further to say there's no meaning in life anyways.
I don't buy it. I don't know. I believe him. Peace? That's someone trying to convince himself of something.
And BoJack tries to argue with him, but it all gets very muddled, because that's the next question that BoJack has to deal with.
You inspired millions. And yet, here I am. Same as you.
What if I never found my meaning in life? If I never found my meaning in life, can I truly believe that anyone can find peace? If I have such a cynical view of the world, do I even think that anything like that is plausible? If I don't think that if I don't think I can ever find peace, that means I never think anyone can find peace. Which means even if a part of me hopes my friends find peace and my loved ones find peace, I'm actually saying none of them will find peace either. And I think he feels a lot of guilt and remorse from that, because I don't think he wants them. He knows these people have suffered at his hands, but just suffered in general in life. And I think doesn't want to be malicious enough to believe that there's nothing on the other side, that there's no possible peace or there's no possible anything. Maybe because BoJack freezes people in time. I think he freezes people exactly where he thinks he's left them. Secretariat speaks as BoJack's father and says,
I wanted you to respect me. I wanted you to love me.
Which is a whole can of worms to open. Because BoJack thinks, oh, well, if we would have had those discussions in life, my life would have been better. So he has to confront himself with the question, would my life have been better if I would have just been told that my dad loved me or my mother loved me? If I had just been told I was loved, would I have turned out better? Is that what I needed? Do I blame my parents for that then? What do I do? When Secretariat does his poem of, I never saw the view from halfway down. Once you're halfway down, you can't take back what you've done.
I could have known about the view from halfway down!
And I think the reason for this impending sense of doom is for BoJack to feel this impending sense of doom of all of these people that he hasn't even been giving the right amount of thought to. The reason they fall into the void is because he's put them in the void. He has to deal with the fact that as he actively doesn't think about them, that's another disservice he's doing to them in death. That he's throwing them in the void.
Stop dancing.
With Sarah Lynn, There's imagery of her even standing there, wearing a shirt with handprints on it, which I hate because it's almost like a representation, again, a visual representation for us of her who has been grabbed in all sorts of places and exploited in all sorts of places. And she's sitting there saying, once it's all over, once the show's over, that's it. You know, if even right at the end, don't stop. Because that's the advice that he gave her.
No matter what happens, no matter how much it hurts, you don't stop dancing.
He's confronting himself. We actually see it when he's talking to Secretariat / his father. He says all you cared about is, your book and drinking and this and that. But, like, replace your book with whatever you want to replace it with. He's talking about himself. When he first saw Secretariat, he was tiny on a screen. And to be then face to face with Secretariat like that, actually, and we've seen him, he played Secretariat, he's been Secretariat, he is Secretariat. And he is also his father, in a way. It's literally looking in a mirror. Which is, again, why it's so funny. It was so in your face the entire time, and it took me the second time to see it.
There is no other side. This is it.
The only person you can rely on is yourself, and when you close off parts of yourself that you're big parts, well, then you're only half yourself, so then you can't even rely on yourself. And this is the moment where he's realizing it, and it's all coming together. And that's why as the chaos sort of gets further and further, even his mother says dying is the easy part. When it's all over, it's the easy part. It's living is the hard part. He goes and he runs and he calls Diane, and even when he's calling Diane, you get the visual of a rope cord around his neck, and literally a last phone call, a last lifeline, something.
Dane, you're gonna save me, right? I called you and you're coming to get me?
So what do I do now?
And the version of her on the other end of the phone is such an idealistic version of Diane. Even you can hear it in her voice. It doesn't sound like her. It sounds as the nicest, sweetest version of her to exist. But Diane never answered the phone. And the episode ends with a flatlining sound, which is chilling. BoJack couldn't blame one singular person for his shame, and he couldn't even understand when he actually put it all out there. I don't think he fully understood the source of his shame. I think he kind of understood the source of his shame, and I think he was reaching the conclusion, but in reality, I don't think anyone was meant to get any sort of closure out of this episode, because the whole point is there were still many tragedies that took place, and there was nothing, once a tragedy takes place, to even finding any sort of meaning in that, and even finding any sort of silver lining in that is difficult. You're meant to feel a sense of senselessness in all of it. You're meant to feel confusion. You're meant to feel the nuance and the complexity of everything. And I'm not saying nuance and complexity of BoJack's feelings towards everything. I mean the nuance and complexity of, Corduroy and Sarah Lynn's death. They were avoidable, They should have lived much longer. They should have lived much healthier lives. But who is to blame? I think even with Sarah Lynn, when we're sitting there and discussing about Sarah Lynn, a big part of the discussion, yes, we see BoJack's role in it, but you can see that Sarah Lynn was exploited by many different people. There's a wider discussion to be had in relation to her. There's a wider discussion to be had in everyone's death that showed up to that dinner. I think what I like about this episode is that it's left me feeling this type of way. It's left me feeling empty and confused and curious and thoughtful and all of these different feelings. I don't leave the episode feeling good, a bit disgusting, very impressed, because it's a very well done episode. It's really good. There's so many things that if you keep revisiting this episode over and over again, you're going to see something new. I think that's all I'm going to say for now. because I may have to revisit again, maybe with what my original thesis was going to be. I did go on a bit of a tangent for this one, but I thought it was worthwhile talking about. I want to say something really insane happened in the last week where I posted my last video saying thank you so much for helping me hit 500 subscribers, it took me a year to hit 500 subscribers. And I don't even know what I said in that video. Really, that resonated so much, but because of it, I now have over 1,000 subscribers, which is insane. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for indulging me, and I am going to try to leave on a slightly lighter note after what I know is going to cut into a very heavy video.
This table's been wobbling all evening. If I wanted to flop around and get seasick for an hour, I'd call your mother!